Welcome to today's JD Power webinar, 7 reasons your retention strategy isn't working and what top carriers are doing differently. I'm Michael Vermillion with JD Power, and with me today we've got 2 operational experts that we've worked with many times over the years, and thought Mike Forsyth and John Farstvedt, welcome to the webinar. Thought you guys could really bring a lot of color here in terms of the problems that we're seeing across the industry when it comes to retention, signs that people should be looking for that would indicate that they do have that particular issue, and then maybe some high-level ideas in terms of how to attack it. So Mike, John, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, Michael.
So just by way of background, the reason we're doing the webinar today is that in our research, JD Power does a lot of work researching the customer experience, customer journey across shopping, servicing, and claims. And so we're really kind of providing that outside-in perspective, if you will. And we do find across those different customer journeys several key moments of truth that impact retention. And if you subscribe to our research and our studies, we share that with you. What we have in mind for today is a bit different. We want to take it to the next level and just give you some ideas on how to improve your retention performance, really from the point of view of an independent third party. So that would be the team that's on the webinar today, and begin to give you the tools that you would need to get an inside out view. So Mike, John, is that kind of the right way to think about it?
Yes, I agree. Yep.
So, okay. So the idea here is we know it's an issue. We've got the data. We've seen the best practices. We know what they are. We want to share some of those tools with you today, and we're really kind of in it with you. So let's dive into the meat of why we're talking, and then we can get into the 7 reasons. Okay, so why is retention an issue now? The market, the P&C market in particular, was in a hard market for a couple of years. We came out of that at the end of last year with the premium increases. But one of the results of the premium increases is that we're now seeing shopping and even switching rising, even among the high value customers. So you can see up to the right here, we've got some data from our shopping intelligence program where we're looking at the 30-day average for shopping rates and the 30-day average for switching rates. These are Q3 numbers starting in 22 through this year, 25. And we can see shopping is at pretty much an all-time high, and switching is continuing to grow. So that's an important reason to focus on retention. Another reason is that when you think about growth and where you're spending your money, a lot of companies spend a lot of money on acquisition, but perhaps don't put the proper amount of resources against retention, which is just, it's a cheaper way to grow and to grow your customer base, grow your premium base than acquisition is. But for a bunch of reasons we'll talk more about today, retention tends to go underfunded. Another reason to focus on it is that it doesn't take a lot to move the needle when it comes to profitability. So just even a small gain in retention can drive major improvements in profitability. And so connecting the dots between retention and your retention efforts and your retention results back to core pillars of financial reporting like profitability is one of the keys to success here. We'll talk more about that today. So let's dive into the reasons. Let's start with reason number 1, and that is no true ownership of retention. And so what we mean here is that if we walk into a company and we want to understand why their retention performance isn't where they want it to be, this is one of the first things we'll be looking at, is asking the question, who owns retention? And it kind of gets back to this idea of what gets measured gets managed, and what gets owned gets done. this is a problem. If there is no true ownership of retention, it's a problem for a bunch of different reasons. One is that if retention is everyone's job, no one really prioritizes it. We'll see fragmented efforts with no kind of unified strategy. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There's kind of a lack of empowerment in the organization to say what's working, what's not working. You can be guilty of ignoring customer pain signals that would be present if you had better established ownership of retention. And there's some other reasons this is a problem. Mike, John, any other thoughts here in terms of not just retention, but other operational aspects where we've seen over the years where if you don't have an owner, it doesn't get the proper amount of focus, doesn't get the proper amount of investment?
Sure. I agree with what you've said, Michael, related to this is that, it comes down to that shared responsibility is there's no accountability, and it doesn't get properly resourced either when there's not the clear ownership, because there's no point to give that. And it relates back to what you started at the beginning, is the ROI on retention is much higher. You just have to make a little bit more investment for a very big gain versus trying to acquire new customers.
And if you don't have a true owner, you don't have the opportunity to assemble things such as a effective feedback loop, demand that information comes up that's going to really help from frontline employees all the way to the top to really organize that information effectively and then plan accordingly. And to keep that information from being nuanced and sanitized as it gets to those leading executives. You want somebody in control who has the authority and autonomy to demand the appropriate information and to be able to act on it.
Yeah, love that. So how do you know if this is a problem at your organization? So here, if we were talking to you, working with you on this issue, these are some of the signs or signals that we would be looking for, some of the questions we would be asking. And so one of the first ones would be, do you have an enterprise level KPI around retention that's got strong visibility with both the C-suite and the board? So does that KPI actually exist? Is it visible? I think another thing we would look at is, do you have a bunch of, a collection of retention projects versus a comprehensive, cohesive, ongoing strategy around retention? And then finally, when we look at metrics, for example, if retention is being treated as a lagging outcome as opposed to something that you're predicting and getting ahead of, that's kind of another sign or signal that you don't have the proper amount of ownership around retention. Mike, John, would you agree with these? Would you add anything to this in terms of what we would be looking at from a kind of like an audit or diagnostic perspective?
Yeah, just another level to take it to is that the true ownership. Does everybody in the organization know that retention is part of what they're supposed to do? Whether it's an agent on the phone taking a call, or whether it's one of your somebody out in one of your agencies, that are they looking at retention as well, or are they incentivized to bring on new customers? So it's having the right metrics out there that are aligned across all people, not just one thing at the board level or something that's reported on quarterly in the C-suite, but everybody has an understanding on how they participate in the retention.
Yeah, microcosm of this might be in the auto industry in the service department, where for years service departments, you waited super long and they charged high prices, and people started siphoning off the Jiffy Lubes, et cetera. And it took the manufacturer to really organize efforts and put together processes to attack the retention so that their customers would stay inside instead of going elsewhere. And it's that kind of process and focused organization that needs to take place in order to really effectively impact retention.
Okay, great. So what are some best practices that you could deploy? What's the playbook if you've got this issue at your organization? And today, we still don't have enough time today to kind of go through the whole thing. So we're just going to share a couple of ideas, and then we're happy to, if we get a chance to meet with you, we're happy to share more. But yeah, I think it starts with just making sure that you're assigning ownership at the executive level for retention. So certainly that would be kind of step one. Taking it to the next level, it's important to have cross-functional alignment. When it comes to retention, everybody's clear in terms of what the goals are, how we're going to budget for it, what the measures are going to be. And when we say cross-functional, we mean customer service and the agents in the call center, working with marketing and working with underwriting, working with claims, working with the agents in the field, so that we're all kind of on the same page. And then another best practice here is if you don't have a good feel for or a roadmap in terms of how to improve retention, just starting with some sort of an audit to diagnose your current state. We think, of course, as JD Power, benchmarking against your peers is a good idea in terms of understanding what good looks like, and then building out a coordinated roadmap. Mike, John, anything to add here in terms of the playbook?
Yeah, just to build on your last point, Michael, is that yeah, look at the JD Power score and kind of see where you're sitting, but then go down that next level. One of the things we're going to introduce at the end of this is that we've got a simple tool to help you self-diagnose, but then getting to a deeper level or willing to have the conversation with you.
And I'd say assigning the leader, the accountable leader is critical. The next step is empowerment and authority is key as well, because without true empowerment, the organization may be pointing to say, hey, that's John's department, and it goes from a situation where nobody owns retention to everybody pointing the finger at one person. They need to have that cross-functional connection and authority to really be able to impact the retention mission.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, let's move on to reason two. So reason two, your retention strategy or retention performance isn't what you think it should be, would be this idea of there's just a series of fragmented, disconnected efforts across the company around retention. The reason this is an issue, of course, is that if you don't have a cohesive strategy, you're not going to be able to get the compounded gains that would come from a single strategy across the entire company. Another reason that this is important is really kind of from the customer's point of view, right? So if you have a series of fragmented efforts around retention, your customers are going to pick up on that because they're going to notice at the different touch points that they're getting different answers, different responses from the company when they have questions, or if they're trying to perform some sort of a task or get a question answered. If this is also an issue in that if it's a bunch of different small efforts across the company, then no one's really optimizing the kind of the end-to-end journey for the customer. So in a particular effort, you might be optimizing at the local level or within your own silo, but not looking at the journey across the board. Mike, John, any other thoughts here in terms of why this is important?
Yeah, so making sure that your customer doesn't have more knowledge than the folks in your organization. So
Good point.
If they're having a conversation with them, an agent you call in, they should have knowledge of any email that went to the customer, any marketing that was mailed to them, any previous phone calls they had with them, any texts that were sent to them, any website visits they've seen, but that holistic view as to where's the customer coming from, that I can give them the attention they need based upon where they are.
Yeah, Mike, that's great information. You don't want the customer calling in with more information than your Frontline's employees. In addition, you have to really watch to make sure that there aren't different answers coming from different interaction channels. That's the other piece of coordination to really make critical in terms of the digital environment that we now work in, to make sure that all that information is consistent.
So how do you know this is an issue at your organization? So here are the kinds of things that we would be looking for, and we would advise you to look for as well. Like the first question we would ask if we came in, we would just ask for the playbook. What's the unified playbook for retention at your company? And if that doesn't exist, that's kind of a clear sign or signal that you probably have a bunch of disconnected efforts that are taking place. We would also want to look at your customer touch points and check for inconsistency there. And then a third one that may not be as obvious, and that is asking the question around, are your retention efforts proactive or are they reactive? And if they're reactive, that's probably the result of the fact that you don't have a unified playbook or a single comprehensive strategy around retention. Mike, John, what other kinds of things would we be looking for here that would kind of indicate that that there isn't a unified playbook and that retention is a collection of efforts?
Well, one of the ones that comes to mind for me is that as we would talk to folks in the organization, they have competing metrics. So in the contact center, they may be focused on average handle time, or some other main metric is what the agents will tell you that the primary thing that they focus on. Or as you're out in the agencies where you have somebody working out there, their metrics may be driven towards how many new accounts are you bringing in every month. And there's a lack of something that points to retention. So that's what we're looking for, is that do people have metrics related to retention, and do they link back to where the senior leadership wants to take the organization?
Another aspect may be internal coordination. So one of the byproducts of our post-COVID business environment is less internal interactions and cross-functional meetings, whereas people are more separated and working from home, et cetera. So organizations need to be intentional in keeping those lines of communication open, have frequent and relevant discussions, maybe have a virtual or real world war room specifically on things such as retention, so we can really keep that focus and unify that plan across those organizations.
So what's the playbook here if this is an issue at your organization? So some of the best practices that we've seen work would be things like starting with orchestration. So orchestrating your retention efforts, making sure that you've got an executive owner or ownership behind that, and that you've got shared goals. That would be number one. Another thing to do would be just getting your arms around the efforts and the initiatives inside the company around retention. So do an audit of your current campaigns, an audit of your communications, looking for opportunities to eliminate overlap and close any gaps. And then finally, building out a workflow that's going to integrate your customer data, your outreach timing, and the follow through across functions. And a lot of times that means getting your CRM, your CCAS, and your call center software to talk to each other. Mike, John, any other thoughts in terms of the playbook or best practices? Again, this is not comprehensive. We're not going to share everything, but these are some places to get started.
Well, I'll jump to something we discussed, a while ago, and that was, can your organization answer what's the experience of your at-risk customer from start to finish, and what is the organization doing to improve it? So again, it gets to that journey of the at-risk customer, understanding it, and are you identifying the areas to attack, and you're doing it in a cohesive way.
And looking at those campaigns and et cetera, a lot of organizations do the same types of campaigns at the same time of year on an ongoing basis. Just taking a fresh look at that and understand what is important right now to our customers, and do we need to tweak those things rather than just roll out the same calendar schedule as we always have.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to number 3. So number 3 is, you have outreach when it comes to retention. but it tends to be one size fits all. And I think that, the quote that kind of jumped out at me on this one is this idea, if a customer is saying, hey, look, if they really cared about me and really cared about keeping me, then why can't they get my name right? Like, why don't they understand or know what products, what services I'm paying for, or if I have contacted them about a particular issue, why is it that the person I'm communicating with actually doesn't know, what that is? So why is one size fits all outreach a problem? So number one, customers do expect personalization. So they do expect that you know what their name is and that they understand or know what issues that they've contacted you about. Number two would be if you don't do segmentation and really kind of take this to a granular level, you might be missing the reason why you have a retention problem to begin with. Customers don't leave for the same reason. It could be they just felt really ignored during the claims process. It could be they're very price sensitive and are reacting to a small premium increase. It could be that it's just a life event. They're moving or they're retiring or whatever. If you're taking a one size fits all approach, you may be missing on those signals. Mike, John, any other thoughts here in terms of why pursuing or deploying a one-size-fits-all outreach is problematic when it comes to retention performance?
Well, here we are in 2025, and everybody expects a personalized experience. So you need to assess all the data related to your customer and treat them and meet them where they're at. And so when, again, in this one size fits all, you can't just say everybody has to call in or everybody has to use a digital channel. You have to also consider meeting them where they are with the right message and timing for them.
Yeah, exactly to that point. We need to meet customers where they want to interact and not push preferences on them. Another example from the automotive world is, people that try to engage to buy a car online, and the first thing the dealer does is try to place a phone call and drive them into the showroom. They're not listening, they're tone deaf. We don't want to do that in our industry either. We want, if customers have interaction points and they'd like to interact with us on those, we really need to honor those. And then another item that I kind of a cousin to this is when we do surveys and we get great information, but the customer has no idea if we did anything with it, what we did with it, if we even heard them, to acknowledge that we have heard them and we are doing something about it in terms of an action would also go a long way in helping people understand that we are listening.
So how do you know if this is an issue in your organization? So the things that we would be looking for, we would ask you to share with us the messaging that you're giving your customers, and we'd be looking to see, is that the same messaging for all customers, or are you designing the messaging for a particular customer persona or segmentation, which is really kind of the next point. We would ask about your use of segmentation, use of personas when it comes to how you're dealing with your customers. A third one that may not be as obvious would be we would want to ask, are you using behavioral triggers or personalization when it comes to outreach? So behavioral trigger would be somebody who's never called into customer service in the past 2 or 3 years, but last week they called 3 times. So that's clearly a risk signal when it comes to retention. That should be triggering some kind of workflow inside your retention strategy. Mike, John, any other, what kinds of other things would we want to look at or ask about to detect if one size fits all outreach is a problem?
Well, you also, getting to this back to the segmentation and so forth, is it, are you continually adapting to your customers? Are you looking for where they are and how they want to be reached? And it's even updating on an annual basis, looking at their communication preferences on how they want to be reached out to, whether they want to be involved in text or they don't want to be involved. But again, it's letting them know that you're listening to them and that they have a voice, and if just subtle things like that, they will give you credit for asking, and then as you customize the service for them, it should improve your retention.
And using any interaction point to actually confirm that we do have the most appropriate and correct method that they prefer to interact with us in, and as in addition, the correct contact information, obviously, so that we can continue to serve them appropriately.
Okay, so what's the playbook to address this if this is an issue? So what we've seen work well is the use of behavioral and demographic segmentation to really understand who's most at risk, number one, but also why they're at risk. If you understand why they're at risk, that's going to really help you with the marketing messaging or the communication messaging that's going to resonate the most for their particular situation. So are you using both behavioral and demographic segmentation? Second would be tailoring the messaging based on churn risk reasons. So if we know they're price sensitive, the messaging should be about price. If we know that there was a service dissatisfaction, the messaging should be around service. And then finally, implementing trigger-based campaigns to respond to early signals, and that you're just not responding to you're not triggering your campaigns just based on things like renewal dates. Mike, John, any other thoughts in terms of the playbook or best practices to address a situation where companies using one size fits all for their outreach?
No, from my standpoint, you pretty much nailed it here on the one size fits all. John, did you have anything?
Just making sure that we take a fresh look at those personas on occasion to ensure that people and markets do change. So just keep our tabs on those.
Okay, let's go to number 4. And this is, I think this is a pretty interesting one, because I don't think everybody thinks about it this way, but are you acting too late when it comes to retention? This idea that by the time you know somebody's leaving, it's already over. And I think that's becoming more and more true in today's world, where a lot of shopping activity and thinking about switching is happening before you get the signals that's going to trigger action within your organization. So it's a problem, because if you're acting too late, you're really kind of giving up the opportunity to save customers that you could have saved if you had acted earlier. The second reason is that if you're coming in late, that can actually feel a little bit desperate or irrelevant to somebody who has already made up their mind to switch, and you're kind of creating friction to whatever it is that they're trying to achieve in their day, because they've already got their mind made up. John, Mike, and any other thoughts here in terms of why acting too late is problematic?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to anticipate where your customers are and offer them something up front. So if you know they've had a claim in the past quarter and they're coming up for renewal, is to get with them early and understand that, and it's just meeting them where they are, as which we've said. Insurance does not need to act like the old cable companies. They'll do everything to try and retain you when you complain, and that's just not a good place for you to be. So you need to be proactive and professional and get them the information early, because it is very expensive for you to try and recover them, and then they become a risk next year as well.
And in the data, we see real ways to build trust and provide evidence we're looking out for these customers as well. An example would be proactive rate increase notifications. So contacting folks to explain why they may be increasing offer alternatives, maybe their deductible changes, coverage amounts, etc. And those customers will appreciate us not just slipping that rate under the door. And that helps from a standpoint of being upfront with them and allowing them to confirm, the value and the benefits of the service that we're providing and offer them options. So those are some of the ways in which you can be proactive and head off that potential opportunity that they would have to go shopping.
Yeah, I'd like to just build on the proactive point. So one of the reasons that acting too late is problematic is that you're missing a big opportunity. The big opportunity is if you are proactive, it's actually cheaper to retain a customer early and ahead of time, as opposed to trying to save them after the fact. And John, I think you laid out some of the reasons why that's true. So how do you know if you're acting too late? Some of the things that we would look for would be just asking the question, when do you start retention efforts? Do they start after the customer is already leaving, after they've already indicated that they're dropping you and moving to another insurance company? Second, we would look for some kind of early warning system. If that doesn't exist, that's a clear sign that you're probably acting too late in many cases. A third one that may not be as obvious is we would look at your save rates on cancellation notices. And if that tends to be lower than industry average or your peers, that's another sign that you're acting too late. Mike, John, what else would we look for here? What kind of questions would we ask to determine if acting too late is something that needs focus?
Well, I'll jump in. It's that some customers are more to retain than others. So if somebody is a bundled account and they've been with you for 10 years, there's things that you need to be doing more than somebody who's simply a one-time customer that you just took on last year. And so the autonomy and authority that you provided to your agents on what they can do to try and retain them. But again, it's I guess our foot stopper for this whole item is you have to be proactive, and especially on those events that people are sensitive to. Price increases, whether your threshold is 10%, that you have something that you notify them, or if they've had a claim in the previous quarter, are you doing something about that they're aware of any changes to their policy that's coming forward? So proactivity is our foot stomper today.
Yeah, once they feel that they're not valued or important enough for you to attempt to provide them critical information in advance, that sets on a path to looking elsewhere. So it's just logical that we want to, we've invested a lot in an annuity that's going to take place throughout their lifetime. Why would we want to stop paying maintenance basically on that annuity to go and invest a lot in a brand new one? It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so some best practices to get started. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. One would be deploy a predictive risk model that flags early indicators. So determine if there's ways to know if your customer base is either getting ready to shop or already perhaps in the early stages of shopping, before they get to the point where it's too late. And we've done a lot of work in this area, and we've seen it be successful, so we know it is possible. Another approach or best practice is customer tiering of the risk-based customer tiering to really prioritize your outreach by, number one, the value of the customer, and then number two, the likelihood to churn. So you want to look at both of those things so that you're focusing in the right areas and you're getting a higher ROI from your retention programs. And then third would be a trigger campaign that's well in advance of renewal. So looking for kind of key indicators of retention risk that would trigger a particular campaign, or if there's a particular behavioral change that happens and triggering off of that. So those are all examples of things that you can do to get ahead, be proactive, and avoid being too late. Mike, John, any other thoughts here in terms of the playbook and best practices?
Well, I would just get back to is making sure that everybody who's engaging with your customers has a good perspective as to the reasons why, and they have what I'll call the approved solutions that they can offer to customers to try and retain them if they've already gotten to that point. And it's consistent. So you don't call into one agent and get one answer. You call into, or you come in through an email and you get something else, or you're in a chat, you get a different answer. So it's providing a consistent experience, and you're valuing the right customers and offering them consistent offers.
Yeah, we have the data. We just need the organization and action, and then measure what those results are to ensure that we're hitting the mark.
Okay, let's move on to reason 5. Another reason why your retention performance isn't where you need it to be is that there's a disconnect between the focus on profitability and the ROI of retention. So the basic idea here is, like, if you don't have a clear ROI story for your retention programs, there's a really good chance that your retention efforts are underfunded in general. If you have this disconnect, it's problematic for a couple of different reasons. One is that you have to remember that all of the resources the company is being competed for. So the money that you need for retention is kind of up for this competing with acquisition, for example, for resources. Acquisition gets a lot of money. It's well tracked, well documented in terms of performance. And if you don't have a good connection between retention and profitability, it's going to be harder to get money for retention when it's up against acquisition, for example. In general, it's just harder to justify a program or investment, or scale a program or investment when you can't really measure the results of it. And so that's another reason why you would want to get this fixed. John, Mike, any other thoughts in terms of why having a disconnect between profitability and retention ROI is problematic?
Well, it goes back to your resourcing within the organization, is that as you're competing against resources, such questions could be asked as, if we could improve our retention by 1 percentage point, what would that mean to us financially? Looking also is that what segments are worth savings. As we said on our previous point, not all are the same. That you look at, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck on our retentions? And if you don't have those answers, retention is going to not be, it's not going to be universal, and it's just going to be simple point solutions with not a clear answer.
Agreed. Having the right personnel in place and the right goals and measurements would be key, but it's essential to connect the dots.
So how do you know you have a problem here? How do you know that there's a disconnect between profitability and retention ROI? So some of the things that we would be looking for, the questions we would be asking, would be things like, can you show us the connection that you've made between retention and your financial metrics? Does that exist? A couple of things that might not be as obvious would be, are you launching campaigns without really understanding what your baseline is and what your goals are for that campaign? Another example would be, you're making retention investments that get budgeted and approved, but you're not really tracking the results of those retention investments. So these are kind of 3 clear signs or signals that there isn't a strong connection between the investment you're making in retention and profitability. Mike and John, what other things would we be looking at, or what other questions would we be asking to really kind of uncover if we've got a disconnect issue between profitability and retention ROI?
Well, one of the first slides we showed in this presentation today was how retention has gone down the past few years. And so you're looking at that metric, but you are also looking at, as you break down your customers, what are you doing proactively to help reduce that? So those would be, do you have the programs in place, is my answer.
And I'd say take a look at, in terms of retention, what would the value be, and how much of that budget that we're spending on acquisition and those critical resources could be effectively utilized and redistributed if we just had a better retention program.
So if this is an issue, what's the playbook? So some of the things we would recommend in terms of best practices is just starting off with some kind of a retention ROI framework, getting that built out, making sure you're connecting your campaigns back to revenue, margin, customer lifetime value, so that you can actually point to an ROI. And then from there, tracking campaign effectiveness, not just at the campaign level, but at the segment level, the policy level, so you really understand what's working, what's not working. And then finally, including reporting of your ROI from retention efforts in things like your QBRs and board level presentations to make it visible. Mike, John, anything to add here in terms of best practices or for playbook to kind of make that connection between profitability and retention investment?
Well, we mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's so much cheaper to keep a customer than it is to acquire one. So I would ensure that, any of your reporting to the board and to the executive level, that you're showing both retention spend and acquisition spend and the success of both of those areas on your monthly meetings or quarterly meetings, so that you can see that where the spend difference is and whether you're getting a return that you want.
Yeah, retention should be more than just a number. It should be a discussion and a goal-oriented action plan in those meetings. That's the difference, I'd say.
All right, let's move on to number 6. And this one may not be as obvious, but it's something that we see over and over again in our work when we do our performance improvement work. And that is, you perhaps have policies and processes that are actually working against you. In this case, policies and processes that work against retention. The idea here is that if you've got policy-driven friction, that's going to erode loyalty among your customers. So eroding loyalty is one reason that this is problematic. Another, maybe not so obvious reason this is problematic is that if you've got policies and processes that work against your retention, your front line is going to know that. They're going to recognize it, and they're going to create their own workarounds. The problem with workarounds at the frontline level is that you end up delivering inconsistent experiences because not every frontline person is going to use the same workaround. Mike, John, any other thoughts here in terms of, and you've seen this a lot in your work over the years, why having policies and processes that work against you is problematic?
Yeah, I'm going to relate it a different way here, is that when you make it hard on your own employees to deliver a great customer experience, that comes through with your customers. So one of the things that's not said on the slide, but it comes through, is that your employee experience becomes your customer experience. So if they are not funded and feeling that they can deliver the great experience to keep you as a customer, it will come through.
Yeah, an example might be frontline employees, if they don't have the authority and autonomy to assist those customers like they need to, and they're measured according to a clock as opposed to a customer experience, their motivation is going to be to meet those metrics that they're being held to, which may be minimum call time. So they're not going to offer those creative solutions to a customer necessarily within those guidelines. They're going to do the bare minimum to get the call completed and moving on to the next call. We really need to involve them in those solutions. And another thing that we haven't seen lately is a lot of huddles and opportunities for frontline employees to actually provide that feedback back up to the top, so that those policies and procedures can be assessed accordingly.
So how do you know this is an issue in your organization? So some of the things that we would look for, questions we would ask, would be things like, do you have very rigid rules that just undermine customer loyalty? So do you have particular policies around billing or cancellation or discounts or claims that are just overly strict? Another thing we would want to look at is your retention efforts that end up being blocked by operational friction. So you have a high risk customer, but your operational rules make it hard to really act on saving, that particular customer. And then a third one, this one may not be as obvious, but just do your customers really understand what they're getting in their relationship with you in terms of the benefits of the relationship, the service and the value of what they're getting for their premiums that they're paying? Is that confusing to them? Is it even inaccessible? Mike and John, what other kind of things would we look at in terms of signs or signals to determine if an organization has this issue of policies and processes that actually work against retention?
Well, I'm going to give you two examples. One is, in today, you need to have your policies and processes set up in a digital first environment so that the customer can educate themselves and get answers for themselves and not have to call in. But when they do call in, that your systems are set up and your processes and so forth, that when the call gets routed, it gets to somebody who can help them. It's not routed to somebody who can't help them and then says, oh, that department doesn't open until Monday at 8 a.m. and we'll get back with you. So those are the types of things to look at, is to ensure that as you're evaluating your processes, how many times can your customers get things done with a first contact? And that will give you the context as to whether that's through the digital channel or when they call, you can do one and done.
Yeah, that first contact resolution is key in any of those channels that the customer is interacting with. And another piece of that might be resource knowledge center for those individuals that are customer facing, so they have the information they need. It's organized effectively and quickly accessible, so that we are singing off the same song sheet and able to deliver the most current and appropriate information.
Okay, so if this is an issue, what are some of the best practices or the playbook to address it? So what we typically would do or advise our clients to do would be just start with an audit of your top reasons for churn, and then from there kind of figure out which ones or identify which of those reasons for churn are tied back to policies that are contributing to that. Another place to look would be your customer complaints, where you're seeing escalations and cancellation notices. Just reviewing those to look for signs that you've got policy friction patterns. And then finally, empowering your agents with the discretionary tools that they need or an override path in order to save customers. Again, this is not comprehensive, but these are three of the things you can start doing today to start addressing this issue. Mike, John, I think we probably have like a lot of other things, particularly in this case, but any other thoughts here?
Well, I'm just going to name drop some of those high friction moments around insurance. One is renewals, around the renewal, maybe something's changed. Be proactive on what you can do around the renewal. Billing, anything around billing. Be able to offer discounts proactively, not just when they're coming in with the call or coming in through an email or text or however they interact with you. But it is looking at, again, what you said, Michael, of audit those top reasons for churn and make sure your policies and processes are as seamless as possible. And getting back to our original point, be proactive and anticipate where your customers are going to be before they make the call.
The other piece might be making sure that we're communicating to agents and frontline employees the importance and the data that we are collecting. We have a tremendous amount of data, and a lot of times it's reported to the top of the house and it's retained within our customer experience groups, but making sure that all that great information is provided to those folks, that they are aware of the big picture and the role they play in it.
Okay, to finish up then, reason number 7, and again, this is something we've seen over and over again over the years in our performance improvement work, and I think it's going to be true with retention as well, is that there's a disconnect between the vision that the executive team has and perhaps even what they've communicated, and then what's actually being executed on the front line. And so the idea is that, if your goals don't resonate with the front line, then your strategy remains theoretical. So this is obviously problematic, because if you don't have that connection between where the executives want to take the company and what's actually happening in the front lines, then that strategic intent is just failing to actually translate into action. Mike and John, you guys have seen this a lot over the years. Any other thoughts in terms of why this is problematic when executive vision is not translating it actually into frontline execution?
Well, the example I can give is that, executive leadership may set an example that you want to reduce churn by 10%. And what we've seen from our data that we just provided you, churn is up at like 20 to 30% over the past few years. But you can look at frontline staff, and they're being judged on how fast did I handle that? How well am I adhering to my schedule? Or if they're in a chat environment, are they able to handle 3 or 4 chats in a certain quantity per hour? There is nothing in what they're being measured related to lifetime value. There's nothing in there related to retention. And so you have this disconnect, but it's not reaching out. That it's theoretical. It's not something that, as Michael said in the statement here, the front line has no connection to it.
I'd say another piece is considering, again, the frontline experience. There, often these folks are walking in, they got a inbox that's filled up with emails overnight. And the phone starts ringing immediately the minute they sit down. There's not a lot of time for after call work. So they may have a wealth of information to provide back in terms of why things in policies are or are not working when they get to the front lines, but they don't have an opportunity to really share that and organize those thoughts. Things like team huddles and meetings, those are essential things that need to happen in order to really get that feedback loop back to the management level, so that we can assess if these policies and practices are indeed the right ones, and if they're being effective or not. That's something that we really talk about a lot, is those huddles, and from an agent perspective, communicating effectively and continuously to agents these same effective policies.
Okay, so what kind of questions should you be asking to determine if you've got this disconnect between where the executives want to go and what's happening in the front line? So I know some things that we would look at would be, show us your last town hall slide deck, and let's see how you're talking about retention. Is it a strategic priority in the town hall? Now let's look at your systems. Are your systems set up to improve your retention and performance in the same way that is described, or the same level of intensity, let's say, as was described in the town hall? A second thing, we would want to interview the front line and just understand, are they clear or not clear in terms of what their role is when it comes to retention? And then another thing we think we would look at would be operational KPIs. So do you have operational KPIs tied to retention? Mike and John, what other things would we look for? What other questions would we recommend asking to determine if there's a disconnect here between what the executives want to take the company and what's actually happening?
Well, I'll just introduce one other thing. It related is that most contact centers and your agents out in the field, you have recognition programs. Do your recognition programs provide them some type of incentive to improve retention? Or is it around attendance, or is it more around getting new accounts or getting new lines of service? So it all gets down to, are there KPIs tied to the retention, and is it getting down to the front lines? And I'm going to turn it over to John, but do they have the time to handle it as well?
The other piece I'd look at is there actually agreement at the executive level as to what that vision and those goals are? If there isn't alignment, then those organizations reporting to those executives actually be operating in conflicting or competing ways. So really one of the things we look at is a a cross-functional executive alignment to start with before you even get to the translation to frontline activities.
Okay, so this can be kind of a tricky one because it's a big issue, but just in terms of the playbook or the best practices, first of all, you want to make sure you're actually cascading the retention goals into things like operational KPIs, but also the scripts, the incentives, the training. So not just communicating, but actually doing the cascade and the integration of those goals into things that are very important. And John, I think you talked about this a little bit, making sure that the frontline teams are actually equipped with the tools they need, the visibility, the flexibility to act on retention risk, for example. And then finally, making sure that the executive team isn't just communicating a vision for retention or goals for retention, but they're actually connected with frontline operations so that feedback loop does exist, so they can understand, are the goals realistic, and are we moving the needle, and if we're not moving the needle, why? Any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about our experience of being in literally hundreds of companies. Is that usually when we go in, we want to talk to the executive team and find out where they're trying to take the organization, and we understand the vision. And then we go talk to the front lines, the people that are actually meeting with the customer, whether it's on the phone or in person or in a digital experience, and what type of experience they're able to provide. One of the most telling things that we find out there is at the supervisor level. Are they providing the right instruction to the front line with the vision that the executive team has? And are they getting the resources to be able to execute against it? And so that goes not only against retention, it's your whole operational customer experience. So focusing that you have a consistent message across, I'll call it the three levels: the executive level with the vision and where you want to go, the front lines and what they can actually execute against, and then are you giving the supervisors the tools and autonomy to get the best out of your employees?
That's a solid point. Supervisors often are overextended or put on special projects and all kinds of other things, and it interrupts their core function of really assisting those frontline employees of being the most effective conduits of the organization as they can. And then from a frontline employee standpoint, just translating that vision into tools, technology, intelligence, resources, and goals that they can effectively execute the vision. So it's more than just words on a piece of paper. They actually have to do the work, and they have to have the tools, resources, and information to do it effectively.
Okay, so that was terrific, guys. Thank you so much. Just to finish up, just reinforcing the idea that retention truly is a financial lever, especially when it comes to profitability. A small increase in retention can result in millions of dollars in saved premiums. If you do that, then you're also going to reduce your reliance on acquisition spend, so you're helping that way as well. So the net is you're improving your margin, your predictability, lifetime value of your customers, and it really should be reported as a core business KPI. And just in terms of what top carriers are doing, we can share a lot more about this when we have a chance to talk, but we see the top carriers when it comes to retention doing things like running structured retention diagnostics, benchmarking their performance against peers and best-in-class standards, prioritizing, and we talked about this a bit earlier, prioritizing segments with the highest risk and the highest value when it comes to the retention investment. Combining AI with human-led outreach is another, I think, more recent innovation. And then tracking ROI, not just across retention in general, but at the campaign and segment level. And happy to kind of dive into any or all of these areas in future conversations. So in terms of next steps, we actually have a free self-assessment guide that you'll be able to download. We'll include that in the link in the follow-up email. Also, we would suggest if this is an issue, if retention performance is something that you're faced, and you're either wrestling with it or just have questions about it, or we want to kind of sanity check what you're doing against what we've seen, we're happy to jump on a call with you to kind of talk through it. And if nothing else, launch a 90-day pilot that's focused on measurable improvement. So as Mike said at the beginning, traditionally JD Power is giving you the, let's see, because I think we can go back on camera at this point. As Mike said at the beginning of the webinar, or I think we all said at the beginning of the webinar that traditionally JD Power has provided the kind of outside-in perspective in terms of the data across customer journeys, especially when it comes to retention, those key moments of truth that do impact retention. What we're trying to do today is to kind of go to the next level and provide you the tools that you need to do more of an inside-out effort around retention. Mike and John, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on retention performance and some of the things we talked about today?
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity for us to share some of the things that we've seen. Again, is that part of our intention of sharing this with you today is to help you internally. We're an independent third party that we can come in and help you move the needle in ways that you may not be able to do on your own. And yeah, give us a call and we'll see where we can help you out.
Yeah, along those lines, JD Power has a tremendous amount of data and resources for anybody that really wants to take a fresh look at their retention and set their goals. And from an inside outlook, we do provide that objective, independent third-party view. So if you find that helpful, we'd love to help.
Thanks, guys. There's one more call to action I didn't put on the slide, but we talked about. What we'd like to hear from you would be, we talked about 7 different reasons why your retention strategy might not be working as well as you had hoped. We'd love to hear from you, which of those 7 reasons really resonated? And maybe just send us an email ranking the 7 reasons in order, or maybe just send us the one that really is kind of the top of your list. We're super interested in that. If you do that, we're happy to send you some more information that we've done in terms of our research and our knowledge of best practices for that particular reason. So, Caroline, we can make that an additional deliverable in our call to action or next steps. So thank you very much for joining us today, Mike, John, and we thank all of our webinar attendees as well. And please check your email for the follow-up coming out of this webinar.